Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop's March 2021 installment of the Before Time reading series. Like, let's just jazz hands on that real quick. Oh. My name is Michael Kleber-Diggs, and I'm an MPWW instructor, and I'm also our board president. I'll be your host tonight. Before we get started, I want to just take a moment to recognize the tragic violence in Atlanta and in Boulder. The 8 people who died in Atlanta, most of whom were Asian women, the race hate and gender hate behind those hate crimes, and to the 10 people who died in Boulder. I remain hopeful that community and through community and coming together through things like art and poetry, we can be reminded about what's honorable and wonderful in humanity. And that when we come together in this way, we offer a thoughtful response to hate and violence. But it didn't want to get too far into the event tonight without acknowledging those tragedies. and the people who have lost their lives, and the violence in America and the gun violence in America as we work toward better. I want to remind everyone that this reading is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel. So if you're feeling bashful, please feel free to turn off your cameras, and please remember to stay muted during the program. We hope you'll stay until the end so that you can send greetings and cheers and words of encouragement and support to our students who are watching on the inside. And to everyone else who's watching this at a later date, we're sending you all the good vibes through the ether, through time and space and bars. Before Time was inspired by our bi-monthly reading series with the Stillwater Prison Writers Collective. Since the in-person reading series is on hold indefinitely during the pandemic, we wanted to offer this monthly recorded event as a small offering to our students who we haven't seen since early March of last year. Before Time brings together local and national writers, as well as our instructors and mentors. In April, we'll have another amazing reading to celebrate National Poetry Month. It'll be hosted by Janata Petrus-Nassa, so please stay tuned. We'd also like to thank our new sponsor. We have a sponsor. Oh my goodness. Voices in the Valley Reading Series, which is funded by Saginaw Valley State University in Michigan. We are grateful to you for your generous support of Before Time, and we'd like to send a warm welcome to all of the students in Michigan who are watching. Tonight, MPWW is delighted and honored to bring you 4 brilliant writers, Kaveh Akbar, Anaïs Deal-Márquez, David Lawrence Grant, and Mai Der Vang. After each distinguished reader, we'll have a quick chat. Then we'll end the evening with special messages from our amazing MPWW instructors, Chavonn Shen and Rachel Moritz. To kick off the evening, thanks to our friends at We Are All Criminals and our collaboration with the Scene Project, we're thrilled to feature our MPWW student, Jeff. Jeff became interested in writing after his freshman English composition class at Grambling State University. But after graduating, he didn't really write much until his incarceration. Writing helped him believe he still had purpose and could contribute something to his community. He's currently a student in the Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop program and first started journalistic writing in 2011 when the Minnesota Sportsman Recorder, the state's longest running African-American owned newspaper, which has been around since 1934, offered him a monthly column called Reaching Out from Within. Jeff has won numerous awards, including a 2020 MPWW Pamela J. Caligari Broadside Award and a Penn Prison Writing Award in memoir. He's also co-editor of Hidden Casts, Exploring America's Vulnerable Classes, which is forthcoming with Coffee House Press.
I'm Jeff Young, and this piece is capital B. It all started with a word. It all started with black man. It was all fine until the end of the sentence ended with black man. The problem, according to my 9th grade English teacher, was the capital B. It's just an adjective, the teacher told me, another in a snaking line of racial diminishments of black men. It all started with a word. It all started with I am. I am more than an adjective leaped from my deep African throat, deeper than the roaring Atlantic that swallowed my ancestors' leap to a freedom that only death could bring. I am the word when God said be, and I was black man. My black is no hue or pigment. I've seen cola nut, cocoa bean, baobab bark, and Sahara-colored men, but I've never seen Crayola black skin. I don't accept your European trademark label. Nah, teach. When I speak of black man, I speak of a culture. The culture of kings like Sanjata, queens like Hatshepsut, warriors like Shaka, billionaires like Mansa Musa, engineers like Imhotep. I speak of the wisdom taught in Axum, the drum beat of their Shanti, the dance of the Bantu. I speak of black spirituality, black food, black universities like Grambling State and Timbuktu, black language and black fashion, black love and self-determination. Yeah, you know what it is. Black power, black power, black power. I am not an adjective in a sentence of life. I am the proper noun. I am the verb, object, subject, and the predicate. So give my culture its due and spell black man. Nah, don't give me nothing. I'm demanding and taking. I ain't asking, and I don't need your correcting. When you see capital B, bow down and let my culture be. For we are black men, created in the image of God, black men, the cradle of civilization, black men, the father of all cultures. We are black men, black men, black men.
Footprints lost, toiling at sunset. Sun descends beneath Earth's lip, inhales peach, plum, raspberry haze. Moon's gravity devours time. Our fingertips dive, sift wet Nantucket, clutch crescent clams. Seagulls float below cotton candy plumes, dissolve into sky fire. Their songs recede. Ocean's edge tumbles towards us, froths, hungers for our trailing souls. Dark depressions in the sodden beach, mute echoes convey a human ache. We were here. Thinking we made truth in sands of time, the ocean unfurls, and we are erased.
Thank you so much, Jeff. That was wonderful work. So our first reader tonight is Kaveh Akbar. Kaveh Akbar's poems appear in The New Yorker, The New York Times, Paris Review, Best American Poetry, and elsewhere. His second full-length volume of poetry, Pilgrim Bell, will be published by Grey Wolf Press in August 2021. His debut, Calling a Wolf, is out now with Alice James in the US and Penguin in the UK. He is also the author of the chapbook Portrait of the Alcoholic, published in 2016 by Sibling Rivalry Press. In 2022, Penguin Classics will publish a new anthology edited by Kaveh, the Penguin Book of Spiritual Verse, 100 Poets on the Divine. In 2020, Kaveh was named poetry editor of The Nation. The recipient of numerous honors, Kaveh was born in Tehran, Iran, and teaches at Purdue University and in the low residency MFA programs at Randolph College and Warren Wilson. Please welcome Kaveh.
Thank you all for allowing me to share this space with you. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be among. I'm excited to hear everyone else, so I won't go on too terribly long. Thank you to MPWW and to Sue and to everyone who's responsible for this event being extant. I'm very grateful for it. I'm just going to read a couple poems. I have a new book coming out, and so I'll read a couple poems from that and one poem by Not Me. I get bored. I mean, I'm sure that you're all experiencing some variety of this as well. I've just spent a lot of time with myself this past year. And so I get a little bit bored with myself. So I'm going to read a poem by Not Me as well. This first poem is I guess the closest thing to like a pandemic poem that I have. It has untranslated Farsi in it. Farsi is a language that I don't actually read. But I'm just learning, so you'll hear me sounding it out, which is embarrassing, and I get in front of that embarrassment by narrating that embarrassment, and somehow like that diffuses like 20% of it for me. I don't know exactly how that math works, but so you'll hear me sounding it out like a 5-year-old sounding out. I'm just learning. It was my first language, but I lost it. So anyways, thank you for having me. It's an honor. This is called Reading Farrokhzad in a Pandemic. Farrukh Farrokhzad was a famous 20th century Iranian poet. Reading Farrokhzad in a Pandemic. The title is a lie. I can't read Farsi. Mehar che ra ke boyad as das dadim bashem as das dadim. I can make out We lose. We lose. I type it into a translation app. We have lost everything we need to lose. In between what I read and what is written, need everything. Hear the waving flag. Hear the other world. Because we need mail, people die. Because we need groceries, people die. I write, we need, knowing we dilutes my responsibility, like watercolors dipped in a fast river. Get behind me, English. When I text, Meharche Roke Boyad as Das Dadim Bashim as Das Dadim. To my dad, he writes back, we have lost whatever we had to lose. Hammering pentameter, whatever we had. People die because they look like him. My uncle jailed, his daughter killed. This is a real fact, too wretched for letters. And yet, my uncle jailed, his daughter killed. Waving world, the other flag. There is room in the language for being without language. So much of wet is cold. So much of diamond is light. I want both my countries to be right, to fear me. We have lost whatever we had to lose. I'm going to read two more poems and then cede the floor to my betters. This next poem is by a non-me poet. This poem is by the poet B. Batchelor. It's coming out in The Nation soon, I think. I'm not sure exactly where it is in the queue, but the name of this poet, he's a Minnesota poet. The name of this poet is B. Batchelor, Batchelor, if you want to find his work. And if you want to find it in the Nation archives when it is published. I love this poet and I love this poem very much. So again, this is not my poem. I claim no credit for this poem, but I did want to read this poem again. I just get bored with myself, so I like to read non-me poets sometimes. So again, this is by the poet B. Batchelor. Discourse on why inmates exit prison worse than when they went in. Bet you thought there was no such thing as too kind. I can't write it into this poem without admitting kindness is a synonym for too close when its nectared syllables sap these prison walls. Oh, kindness, lotus flowering muddy waters, I can't call on your greening nature, your bloom that fruits into song, into breath, in a place rotting under unnatural light, where a staff member who's friendly toward inmates is slurred a murder groupie, asked if they've hugged their thug today, where they are disciplined for embracing the blues out of an inmate, compassioning the self back into the self. I remember when humanness lived inside me like a community garden. Every visitor welcome and nourished in their coming and going, all those bright hues. But my body has become a border. I've let knapweed root and wrangle what no longer will grow. Again, that is by the poet B. Batchelor, and you'll be able to find that poem in The Nation if you would like to read it again sometime relatively soon. So with gratitude to him for sharing that. for writing it, for wringing it out of the ether. Okay, this is the last poem I'm going to read, and then, like I said, I'll cede the floors to my betters. Excuse me. This one is another poem that I did write. I wish I could just read you more non-me poems all night, but I think the ostensible conceit of my being here is that I'm meant to be reading some of mine. This poem is called The Miracle. In Islam, I'm Muslim, I was raised Muslim, and in Islam, the sort of like precipitating catalytic bedrock miracle of the faith is like the Prophet Muhammad went and was like, said to be alone and fasting in a cave, and just like he used to do. He was just like kind of a weird, cool guy who just did that sort of thing sometimes. And then the angel Gabriel came to him one night and was like, hey, transcribe this holy book. And he was like, sorry, bro, like I'm illiterate, like a lot of the people of his time and a lot of the people of his place, he was illiterate, right? And the angel Gabriel was like, poof, now you're not illiterate anymore, and now you can it was a little bit more complicated and dramatic than that, but and then he was able to transcribe, and he started transcribing the Quran, right? And so like the sort of like bedrock miracle of Islam is literacy, sort of like parallel to the virgin birth in Christianity or Catholicism. When I was a kid, I always thought that was like, I was always kind of like a writer, and I always thought like we were sort of winning that one, like Christianity had like the cool youth pastors who like had the guitar and like sat in their chairs backwards, and they were all, wore backwards hats, and we had like these old sort of dusty men, but at least we had like literacy over virginity, which, I don't even know what virginity is, but literacy is like cool to a poet. I mean, it's not a contest. Anyways, this is a much longer preamble than you need. Thank you all so much for having me. This poem is called The Miracle. Gabriel seizing the illiterate man, alone and fasting in a cave, and commanding, read. The man saying, I can't. Gabriel squeezing him tighter, commanding, read. The man gasping, I don't know how. Gabriel squeezing him so tight he couldn't breathe, squeezing out the air of protest, the air of doubt, crushing it out of his crushable human body, saying, read in the name of your Lord who created you from a clot, and thus literacy, revelation. It wasn't until Gabriel squeezed away what was empty in him that the prophet could be filled with miracle. Imagine the emptiness in you, the vast cavities you have spent your life trying to fill with fathers, mothers, lovers, language, drugs, money, art, praise, and imagine them gone. What's left? Whatever you aren't, which is what makes you. A house useful not because it's floorboards or ceilings or walls, but because the empty space between them. Gabriel isn't coming for you. If he did, would you call him Jibril or Gabriel like you are here? Who is this even for? One crisis at a time. Gabriel isn't coming for you. Cheese on a cracker, a bit of salty fish. Somewhere a man is steering a robotic plane into murder. Robot, from the Czech robota, meaning forced labor. Murder labor, forced. He never sees the bodies which are implied by their absence, like feathers on a paper bird. Gabriel isn't coming for you. In the absence of cloud parting, trumpet blaring clarity, what? More living, more money, lazy sex, mother, brother, lover, you travel and bring back silk scarves, a bag of chocolates for you don't know who yet. Someone will want them. Deliver them to an empty field. You fall asleep facing the freckle on your wrist. Somewhere a woman presses a button that locks metal doors with people behind them. The locks are useful to her because there is an emptiness on the other side that holds the people's lives in place. She doesn't know the names of the people. Anonymity is an ancillary feature of the locks. Ancillary from the Latin ancilla, meaning servant, an emptiness to hold all their living. You created from a clot. Gabriel isn't coming for you. You too full to eat. You too locked to door, too cruel to wonder. Gabriel isn't coming. You too loved to love, to speak, to hear, too wet to drink. No, Gabriel, you too pride to weep. You too play to still. You too high to come. No, Gabriel won't be coming for you. Too fear to move. You too pebble to stone, too saddle to horse, too crime to pay. Gabriel, no, not anymore. You too gone to save, too bloodless to martyr, too diamond to charcoal, too nation to earth. You brute, cruel pebble. Gabriel, God of man, no cheese on a cracker. Mercy, mercy.
Kaveh, thank you so much. I just wanted to say the ostensible conceit behind you being here is just to share what was ever on your heart. And thank you for blessing us. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Our next reader is Real Talk, one of my closest friends. It's not in the script. I'm off script right now. Just wanted to say, like, one of my closest friends, Anaïs Deal-Márquez, is a multidisciplinary artist raised in Mexico and in the upper Midwest. She is the co-executive director of the Minneapolis-based nonprofit Voices for Racial Justice. Her organizing work with communities of color centers art and healing. She just finished a manuscript of her first poetry collection, which looks at family legacies of displacement, home, and healing at the US-Mexico border. And it is, by the way, spectacular. She has been published in Poetry Magazine, The Breakbeat Poets, Volume 4, Latinx from Haymarket Books, and elsewhere. It is my pleasure to welcome Anaïs Deal-Márquez.
Thanks, MKD. This is such a beautiful thing for me to be in this space. I have so much love and gratitude for the work of MPWW and also just to be in the space with different poets in this particular moment with, all the preambles that have been shared, but the heaviness of what we're seeing and witnessing and living in our bodies. I always know that art is the space for some collective breath. So I'm just happy to be here, being able to share a little bit about myself through poems. So yeah, I really am grateful for the space. And I'm hopeful that, what I share can give a little spaciousness. So the first, the groupings of poems I'm going to be sharing are going to cover prayer, spirituality, ancestors. The heaviness of white supremacy is really with me, and so I also have some poetry to share some reflections on that, and really also just the resiliency that's also in our lineages. So rather than introduce individually, I just thought I'd give you a little overview of what you'll be hearing. So this first poem is called "This Is How You Pray." My mother carries the desert on her skin, and rituals of life and death always as offerings to the grandmothers. I tell her they're showing up in my dreams again. Describe the brown skin and the long braids trailing behind, cleansing my body with sage, the tight curls flowing down the backs of women with gentle arms waiting in blue lagoons, holding me in ceremony, their laughter drowning the rain. My mother speaks of the ways ancestors pray over wounded bodies that have rejected new life. She speaks of the ways water holds a body collapsing unto itself, the ways bodies swallow scars made of the rubble we left in the mountains. I want to know the ways a heart can break and still pull itself back together. I want to know how we swallow memories of broken bones. I want to ask if we're strong enough to heal. She tells me the question is the prayer. So I already lied, like a good poet, I still am going to introduce this next one, but this, I had high hopes, but you know, I was a child immigrant to Milwaukee when I was 8 years old from Mexico. And this is one of those like moments that are etched in my body and my memory of what my first experience of this country was. So this one's called How Milwaukee Nights Broke My Heart. The day we arrived, my parents sent me up a narrow flight of stairs, turned on a TV in a heavy new language that made my head hurt. I imagined the ceiling cracking open and swallowing me whole. That night, the silence against this new Midwestern sky felt like it would just take me while everything I knew was on fire. There was no soccer balls against the music of children scream, laughing at night, becoming World Cup commentators. The silence told me stories of fear. Can we be the same after the land slips from under our feet? And if we can, will the rivers still remember our laughter? And if they don't, will our people remember our faces? Will we make it out alive? This one is called Our Love on the Other Side of This Border. Maybe I would have seen you trip over the steps in the patio in between classes, or we would have met on the soccer field covered in mud and you would have asked my name. That crooked smile spreading from your eyes to your mouth. Maybe I would have laughed. Maybe we would have had a nieve in the plaza and you would have held my hand after folklorico or at a fandango where I was learning to dance faster than my adrenaline. Maybe you would have given me a bouquet of mango con chile y limon or elote con queso, and we'd count all the ways cohetes go off in this pueblo and would walk the feria at night wrapped up in blankets, drinking atole. Maybe we would have fought over the meaning of God. Maybe that danzón after drinking the toritos would have made me cry. Maybe I would have broken your heart over a plate of tamales and ponche, or maybe you would have cut me off with a joke. But maybe this land would have been large enough for our hearts to grow. The sun would feel different on our skin. The mercados would give a calmer pace to our lives. Maybe our cuts would be different here with enough medicine to move through salt water. Maybe our roots would allow our bones to be enough. In the middle of the storm, I remember how fickle, tricky, unreliable it really is to think you've lived something, only to discover it was a dream, in which case, was it your dream? Or a dream you think you had, or a dream that's been told to you so many times because that's how your tia learned how to fight back in the middle of the night in a voice that was not her own, which in itself perhaps was a dream. Like the time they showed up in the DR, came out from behind the curtains against the soundtrack of crashing waves, talking about pay attention to your pinche dreams and see, now this is some real education, because if we believe we're going somewhere, moving against any kind of current, how can we think their songs trapped in old parchment and spirits are not real? And isn't that just a trip? Because the only time my abuelo showed up in my dream, he carried kindness in his eyes. And that makes no damn sense, because all I know are broken bones, guns at your throat, hands at your clothes, memories that aren't even your own, but somehow they are in this big clusterfuck map of a family tree, which is the most dramatic telenovela sinking in the Titanic. But see, it didn't sink. It's the pieces of iceberg poking out unevenly in precarious balance, which is The first thing I tell my parents on my 10th birthday, I want balance, which sounds like, damn it, I hate the suburban backdrop that tries to swallow our skin and language, which feels uneven and scary and not my own. And that is how you feel too, because how could you not when neighbors call the cops on you after they give you apple pie smiles at their front doors? Okay, I'm gonna close out with this last poem, which is an homage to the women in my lineage who I carry with me, who helped guide my way. It's called The Women We Lost to the Water. I had a feeling like maybe I know what bones collapsing underwater is like. Like maybe my ancestors died in the ocean, like that feeling of waves crashing over undercurrents like tornadoes, and the water below closest to the ground stays calm. Maybe I'm that water. Maybe you were that water. Maybe you were of the sea. Maybe the sea was a giant vessel that trapped you. Or you lost an entire world, but in the end imagined trees and remembered how to say, I miss you. Maybe your muscles were tired and your grip loosened when the storm flatlined the ship, and maybe new words were born of forgetting that to float means to let go. Maybe floating felt like freedom and baptism and war. Maybe you grew wings and flew above all of it. Maybe your voice still echoes in the middle of rainstorms that feel like silent triumphs of oceans blocking out all the white noise. Maybe red evening skies remember your blood, and we remember to breathe. We remember to breathe, and we remember what we have survived. I'm learning to talk of losing blood you don't know is there, how loss shows up on faces carrying broken bones and wandering spirits that are strong, but still wounded. I'm learning of medicine people and rivers and baptisms and stolen golden churches and little boys learning to hate the women who carry wars and food on their bodies. I'm learning of lost stories across generations, how much must be lost to understand our capacity to be whole. How many women must kill off hands that plow the land and become knives at night? How many daughters will hold the scars of all those broken bones? I don't always know how to talk of women who fill entire rooms with just one look, one motion of the hand, one raised eyebrow, who command respect with small bones, who carry the strength of their ancestors and the llantos of their voice, who cry over the smell of mole, whose skin is jagged and rough from learning to fight young and will captivate entire rooms with contagious laughter bouncing off the walls. I know where this all comes from though, even when I don't, because what's the alternative if it's not to shrink yourself into the smallest seed until you're swallowed back up by the earth? Thank y'all.
Thank you, Anaïs, for your heart and spirit and for the spaciousness in your work, and both tonight and in the community. Thank you so much. Our next reader is David Lawrence Grant. David Lawrence Grant is a Twin Cities-based playwright, screenwriter, and essayist. He's been commissioned to write new work for the Minnesota Science Museum, the Minnesota Historical Society, Mixed Blood Theater, and elsewhere. Most recently, he penned the script for the feature-length documentary Word of Honor, Redeeming Mandela's Promise for Mond World Films, which was released in 2016. He has served as a state mentor for the Givens Black Writers Collective Retreat, an adjunct faculty member at the University of St. Thomas, and as screenwriting mentor at Augsburg University's MFA program in creative writing. He currently teaches screenwriting at Film North, Bolden Films Academy, and the Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop. David is President Emeritus of Screenwriters Workshop, a former member of the Loft Board of Directors, a core alumnus member of the Playwright Center, and a member of the Writers Guild of America West. Please welcome David.
There, and to take a second to unmute myself first. Now I'm with you all the way. All right. I'm going to read you a story that I read at Stillwater a couple of years ago. And it's fun to revisit it tonight. I haven't looked at it for a long time until I whipped it out earlier today. Thanks for the opportunity to read it with you all and to bask in all this creativity and all this love from our wonderful MPWW family. It's a big family and a growing family, and I'm proud to be part of it. Just as a little bit of backstory, this the genesis of this piece came from something that I read in National Geographic, I think, back in 2013 or so. There was a wildlife crusader named Lawrence Anthony, who ran an organization called Organization Earth in Southeast Africa. And on the land that he and his wife staked out and were able to preserve on their own, since there was no government support for it, there was a large group of about 300 or so elephants. And this place served as a refuge for them from poaching, which had eliminated much of the elephant population in that general area. And so that became his life's work for about 20, 25 years. And when he died, somehow that entire elephant family of his adopted children out there in the bush, understood that he was gone. And even though his wife didn't fully share the same passion that he did for wildlife, that changed when out of the blue, what they believed was probably the entire elephant population of the reserve that was the land they had perched on, showed up at her doorstep about 2 days after the death of her husband. They clogged the road, they clogged the back garden, the front garden, and just stood there in silence, these 300 odd elephants. They stayed the next day during the rain, just hung out in the yard, were very quiet. And about, sundown the next day, they all began to make a great deal of noise. They were bellowing and calling out. Then they quieted down, and then they all walked away and disappeared to all their various separate precincts all over the park. And so that was the genesis of this piece, because I got to witness something very similar right on my own street in South Minneapolis. This would have been 2018. And it involved not a herd of elephants, as you can well imagine. I do call our neighborhood the South Minneapolis Wildlife Preserve, but we got no elephants. We do have a bunch of crows, though. And so this story is about them. We humans have a complicated and ancient walk with our distant cousins, the crows. Like feral dogs and coyotes, like feral cats, like squirrels and raccoons, they hang around at the margins of our lives, looking to make a major part of their living from the scraps we discard, from the bits and pieces of animals that get caught in the maws of our civilization and end up discarded in the grass and the alleyways and the streets as carrion. A deep part of our unease with them comes from the tales our ancestors have told about how after a battle, after some grim massacre, crows and other scavengers descend on the site and feast on human bodies, same as they feast on any others, reducing dead humans to nothing more than mere carrion too. They have a high comfort level with us, a much higher comfort level than we have traditionally had with them. They eat the corn from our fields. They shit on our cars and on our windows. They squawk and jeer at us when we go by. They're territorial like us. So when we venture out, we're invading their space, disturbing their peace, messing up their thing. But should we make one-to-one contact with each other, the dance between us can get interesting and intense in a hurry. Like people say in the street, game recognize game. Make eye contact with a crow, and instantly you know you're face to face with a real intelligence, profound intelligence of a far deeper, more complex kind than maybe most of us expect to encounter out there in the animal world. And this encounter can be unsettling. They know something. They're thinking something. They take you in, study you as you walk by, the way you move, the way you seem to regard them, if in fact you notice them at all. Me, I always used to be easy for them to figure, because before my neighbor Virginia gave me a different perspective on them, I freely admit I harbored a visceral dislike for them. I don't hate any critter, but crows used to be right down there with the rats and the bats at the bottom of my list of least favorites. Just the sight of a few in the branches of the grand ancient white oak outside my back door would be enough to bring out the very worst in me, irrational and mean. I'd glare at them, swear at them, throw the odd pine cone at them. When I'd venture out and head down the alley toward the hardware store or the holiday station, the air would come alive with their insistent squawking as they would spread the word from tree to tree. Hey, it's that guy. It's that dude on the prowl again. That asshole who squawks and throws shit. Our distaste was entirely mutual. But my neighbor Virginia changed all that. I loved her because she was a sweet person and a great neighbor, but also because she was so interesting and vital and still genuinely beautiful at the age of 90. So when she got caught up in the cruel vice grip of dementia, I took it very hard. I made a point of paying her more attention, looking in on her more regularly. She began the habit of crossing the street and peering into the tinted windows of the SUV that we had back then. She used to think that someone she knew was sitting in there, just sitting. And it bothered her that whoever it was never seemed to want to come out, especially since she was often convinced that the mystery visitor was someone who had come to see her. I'd talk to her and ease her mind, remind her that it was our car, and reassure her that nobody was in there. The other thing I now noticed was something that had only been at the margins of my consciousness for years. The deep relationship that she had with the neighborhood crows. The sister tree to the massive ancient oak just outside my back door sits across the street at her old place. And it was often alive with crows, dozens of them, scores of them. A humming electric crow boomtown, squawking and jabbering, watching her door, waiting for her to emerge with bulging apron pockets full of breadcrumbs and God knows what all else in there for them. She'd been doing it for years, but since the dementia had set in, there was a fierceness to her sense of mission about it now. This was one connection to the wider world, one foundational piece of herself that she was utterly determined not to lose. She'd coo and talk to them as she spread her goodies across the lawn, and they descend to devour it all. They appreciated her and she them. Life is hard. For solace and comfort, we cling to the tiny moments of grace that make our passage through it a little easier. For them, Virginia was a connection to the human world that was all sweetness and light, an easy meal, a little quality time with a trusted companion. For her, they were not just an opportunity to be of service, they were family. And quality time with them was a high point of her day. Truly, it was something to see. It seemed to disturb the crows to see me so close, watching. A ripple of chatter would spread across the lawn, across the branches of the oak trees between them. What's he want? The asshole. Does she feed him too? I wonder. When the relentless march of her dementia finally kept her confined to her upstairs bedroom, the crows still came. They just sit there jabbering, craning, it seemed sometimes for a glimpse of her. A friend or relative who was an accomplished harpist started showing up a couple times a week to play by Virginia's bedside. They'd open the windows wide, and glorious harp music would spill out into the neighborhood, carried on the breeze, even after the weather started to get a little nippy. Every week, there were fewer and fewer crows in the oak, and those that came were quiet and subdued. And when Virginia died, they seemed to know. I remember returning from Virginia's memorial service and seeing not a single crow in the tree, not one. But one day, about a week later, I was out in the yard raking leaves. I caught the glimpse of a swirling mass of black in the corner of one eye and swiveled to see what it was. From every direction, it seemed, flights of crows were descending on Virginia's oak tree. They soon filled every branch, hundreds of them, cacophonous, crazy, and then, as if on cue, they quieted. They began a bobbing motion. You've seen it, like this, like Jews at the Western Wall, right? That bobbing motion you make when you pray. They began this bobbing motion, not all in unison, but they were all doing it. All of them turned toward Virginia's house, their gaze fixed on her front door, the way they used to do when they were waiting for her to emerge. Soon, quietly at first, they started hooting as they bobbed their bodies up and down. The hooting morphed into a cawing, squawking wall of sound. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. Silence. A couple of noisy jets came and went overhead, and the sounds of traffic from 35W and Nicollet Avenue were in the air, but not a single peep from a crow. I leaned on my rake and stood in silence too. I'd witnessed what some people refer to as a crow funeral before. You know, a few crows will gather in a tree above the body of a fallen comrade and engage in the same kind of behaviors to which I was now witness. But the sheer scale of this event was massive by comparison. Their focus and intent were truly palpable. Moments later, it was over. As quickly as the crows had descended onto Virginia's oak tree, they scattered to the four winds and left. It's quiet over there at the oak most days. A large squirrel's nest sits up high on an upper branch. A handful of crows stop by for an occasional sit. That's all. I imagine the last of the crows who remember Virginia is long gone now, but I'll remember her. She opened a door to understanding and respect from me to a species for which I'd harbored an irrational set of negative feelings. It's liberating to be over that now, a gift. The neighborhood crows regard me differently these days. I make brief, respectful eye contact as I pass by. No alarms get spread across the neighborhood anymore when they see me. I'm just another guy. In fact, I'm a friend now to some of them. I'll tell you another story about some of the conversations I've had with them some other time. Thank you.
Soon, please, David. Soon. Listen, we live in this streaming world where we don't want to wait for the next installment. So I'll look forward to hearing that story someday.
Yeah, you know, it's a pandemic story. Some crows showed up and they wanted to know what's up with y'all.
Yeah,
you know,
what's cool?
Because they said there's been rumors out there, y'all are getting ready to go extinct.
Yeah.
You know, so it was a deep conversation.
The crows know. Listen.
They do.
Yeah. Oh, I want to just hold that line. It's quiet over there at the oak most days. That's so beautiful. Thank you so much. Truly appreciate you, brother.
Thank you.
Yeah. So before we introduce tonight's final reader, we'd like to feature an excerpted piece from our student Fong, then a message from Fong to his favorite poet, Mai Der Vang.
This is Fong. This is an excerpt from Drop a Kite. Listen, look at these two mirrors. They are your eyes from the future. They want you to know that you are on a bumpy road. Start planning your next caper with Genevieve, the young Hmong woman. Bury the red bandana that wrap around your head and hands. Do not blink. Open those virgin ears. Stop appeasing your friends. They are not worth your life. Listen, you owe no one but your mother and father your life. They have abandoned their thatched hut just to give you a future. Do not let their wisdom sit as wax in your ears. Do not get run over on this adolescent road. People can be stingy with helping hands. Let your moan bone age with a person you love. Listen, cherish Jenny's soul-piercing smile. Watch this scene. You will end up taking a life. After you wed pistol to hand, for every shot, scratch 2 years off your future. It will be decades before you will see another road. The number 217-805 becomes you and despised by your ears. Listen, hear your parent endless grief. They miss your jumbled ears. The woman you love will birth someone else, a baby girl. Your legacy will be gesso on canvas and left blank on this empty road. You will miss out when your grandma and uncle wave goodbye to life. Friends,
You have 1 minute remaining.
friends will let you stand in the rain and laugh from the front their sunnier future. You will seek answers in the lines of your palm. Listen, nothing good grows on this dehydrated road. There is no holy water to wash your tattooed hands. Cosmetic could not cover the scar you had caused. You will trade the word, hold me firm into the future for me against the world. Do not deny a future to me and the person you love. Listen to me, for I am you in the future. Love her, so you can say to her that your children got your sleeping Buddha's ear.
We're overjoyed that we were able to let Fong know that Mai Der Vang was joining us tonight, and we're grateful that he was able to send a message to her. It's my pleasure to read it now. Thank you for this opportunity to introduce and praise the poet and essayist Mai Der Vang. Mai Der's words have a way of pulling my heartstrings and calls me back to root every time I feel abandoned by the Hmong people. Mai Der's words held me to be grateful, to have endurance, to never forget the Hmong sacrifice and the language of your Hmong village is a graveyard, regardless of how I may feel about abandonment. Thank you, Mai Der, for your inspiring work. Mai Der Vang is the author of 2 poetry collections, Yellow Rain, forthcoming with Grey Wolf Press in 2021, and After Lana, also published with Grey Wolf Press in 2017. Winner of the Walt Whitman Award of the Academy of American Poets, long-listed for the National Book Award of Poetry, and a finalist for the Kate Tufts Discovery Award. The recipient of a Lannan Literary Fellowship, Mai Der served as a visiting writer at the School of the Art of Institute of Chicago. She teaches in the MFA program in creative writing at Fresno State in California. Please welcome Mai Der.
Thank you so much for having me here today. What an honor, and what an incredible gift, those words from Fong. I am so grateful for that, and for the poem. It's an honor to be with all of you today, to share in this moment with my fellow readers. I'm grateful to share to have this moment of solidarity given the state of our world. Grateful also to the staff, to the volunteers, to the friends, to the community that supports the work of MPWW, and doing so supports writers on the inside. For years, I used to run writing workshops at my county's juvenile detention facility for a program that we have based out here on the West Coast called The Beat Within, whose mission supports the literary expression of young people who are incarcerated. And so this work that you are all doing has such a very special place in my heart. So thank you so much. Thank you to Fong, and thank you to Sue for the invitation to be here. So I have 3 poems that I'd like to read for all of you today. So this first poem is from my book Afterland, and I loved hearing Fong, sort of talk about the idea of just that sense of feeling as though you're still part of something, even if you might feel like you've been abandoned. And I'm grateful for that sort of insight. This poem is called Cipher Song, and it speaks to the ways that we hold on to our histories and our stories by sewing them onto our clothing. And historically, that's what Hmong people have done in order to retain that history, to retain that story as an oral tradition, as an oral culture, than to just sew it onto your clothing. Cipher Song. It's come to this. We hide the stories on our sleeves, patchwork of cotton veins. Scribe them on carriers for sleeping babies, weave our ballads to the sash. Forge paper from our aprons, and our bodies will be books. Learn the language of jackets, the way a pleat commands a line, the way collars unfold as page, sign our names in thread. The footprint of an elephant, snail's shell, ram's horn. When the words burn, all that's left is ash. So this next poem is from my new collection, Yellow Rain, and it's called Anthem for Taking Back. Even after what shrivels on pillows are the syllables of a dream, and our braided furies huddle under porch light. After skyline of lashes close over our ocular machines, and a lightlessness governs the way we move our arms. Long from now, how every breath turns out a copy of the air before, and all air moves through us as cotton. What we heed after a fluorescence capes the skin of our early moon, whatever be the scourge thumping inside our ears. Ember our wings out of exile, it says, ember loudly all of our furious tellings. All right, and the last poem I want to share is a poem that I love reading, just sort of as a way to think about how we are connected to everything around us, to this environment, to the stars, to the moon, just to see that interconnectedness in who we are as people and as human, as part of our humanity. It's called Look to the New Moon. If you must hear the story of my turbulent gaze after waking, the march of my hours to hermit into a higher body, it is that whatever you put into the universe eventually returns. In our oneness of gift, we are eyes together, nerves together, affected together. If I've never told you how madly we share in the stars, how it was all founded for you, then let the longing for Arcturus be the gilding of our sleep. I know when your time was in its making, I was left to sing alone, unfed, to trample through 100 layers of night without a heart to hold my guard. If I had known all those days to listen deep into myself so that you would begin to hear me, I'd sooner soak the decibels of your sails into the exhale of my embrace. A scorning within is within coming back to scorn. A rose quartz promise lifted into the world is the world coming back to surrender its love. Even after I took my health into a vineyard of hawks, I could not break myself from caring, but only to seek you, find you, whisper into your palm, you are not lost, you won't be lost. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Mai Der. the world coming back to surrender its love. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. And thank you for your work in the community as well, and for being with us tonight. We're going to transition to a message from two of our, well, actually, I think we do a Q&A first. And we just had one question that we wanted to ask our distinguished readers tonight. As we gather tonight, the trial is underway for Derek Chauvin, the police officer who killed George Floyd here in Minneapolis. In America, we're marking 1 year since the recognized beginning of the pandemic, a pandemic that has predictably had a disproportionate impact on communities of color, on low-income Americans, and on people who live in correctional facilities. Nationalism and fascism and white supremacy have been emboldened by people in very high places, by conservative political parties, and by the policies of right-wing politicians. I'm thinking again about Atlanta and about Boulder and about the tragic loss of lives there, all of it unnecessary. I'm thinking about the messages from tonight's reading as well, about interconnectedness and spaciousness, about our connection to the creatures of the earth and all of those things. And I'm just so inspired by the power of stories tonight. But I wondered if each of you would just talk a little bit about what you see as the role of artists in these times. How can artists advance the work of liberation? And Mai Der, if I could, why don't we just go in reverse order? Mai Der, David, Anaïs, and Kaveh. But Mai Der, I'd love your thoughts on that, if you would, please.
Thank you so much for that question. For me, as a Hmong American who was deeply enraged by the murder of George Floyd, I acknowledge that even within our communities, within my own community, there is still so much work to be done, so much that still has to be advocated for and reimagined so that people in our communities can start to see beyond the facade of this quote unquote American existence, or to begin to see that these forms of institutional oppression are also happening to them. And for me, I think that the work of the artist is, and the writer is to acknowledge, to call out, and even simply just to know that not everyone is liberated. That some people are, but the vast majority of the world isn't, especially people who are incarcerated on the inside, and especially when you consider the harmful imperialistic acts and the histories of enslavement upon which this world and our society has been largely built. So for me, it's about acknowledging the harms and the failings of the past. It's about speaking emotional truth to bring new light and understanding to that past. And then the final thing that I'll say is that it's for me, it's also about creating the potential for transformation to happen. I think as artists and writers, we engage in our own sort of individual transformation through the works that we do and create. But I also like to imagine that this individual transformation can become a catalyst for a collective transformation to happen. And when I think about our collective potential that we share, it reminds me that we are all connected in ways that we may not even realize, in more ways that we're not aware of. And through that connectedness, that I also brought up earlier and that you brought up too right now, Michael, is just this idea that we are so bound up in this life and in this struggle together. And in that case, if that's the case, then so is our liberation then bound together, right? That we are impacted by what happens to each other.
Truer words never spoken. Thank you so much, Mai Der. David, your thoughts?
There, now I'm unmuted. Yeah, it was beautiful to hear your perspective, Mai Der. I think, I wholeheartedly concur with everything that just came out of your mouth. I want to say that for me, I'm reasonably optimistic right now because of the very profound personal experiences I'm having, connecting with people who are distant kin, related to me, whom I have discovered through the world of DNA matches. That's something I've been doing for a long time now. And, one piece of that has been reconnecting with long missing African kin from the continent, from Angola, the Congo, both Congos, Nigeria, and Ghana. So I'm in regular touch now with these cousins, and we're sharing a lot of information and trying to fill in gaps of missing family history as best we can. That's beautiful and deep and profound. And I'm witnessing the rebirth of some kind of Pan-African dream that looks and sounds and feels different than the first round in the 1920s. Pan-Africanism is reinventing itself as a global movement. And it's not just about people of African descent, it's about everybody. There's ultimately every human walking the face of the earth is a child of the African continent, ultimately. But I also am enjoying and also suffering and having recovered from some of the gut-wrenching conversations that I'm having with all the distant white relatives who I've also discovered during this search. People who are related to me because ancestors of theirs once owned ancestors of mine. And because of the peculiar institution being what it was, we're also blood kin. And a lot of my white relatives have had a hell of a hard time wrapping their heads around that. Some have run screaming in the opposite direction. But the ones who have embraced the possibility of relationship are some pretty deep folk. And, so we've been catching up too on lost family history, trying to make sense of it, trying to figure out how to reach out to each other across the abyss and help some healing happen, some communal healing. And you can't move to square one until people can recognize the harm, the damage that's been done, and the extent of the damage that's been done. And it is brutal to look at because the degree of violence that we're talking about is just overwhelming. And the weight of all that history, we have some willing white shoulders stepping up and saying, well, we created this. I mean, so let us share in some of this and figure out with you where we need to go. If there's any possibility of communal healing, where does it begin and how can we carry our share of the load? So this is deep stuff, and it's keeping me more occupied than I have hours in the day to deal with, right? But I figure that's my work right now, dealing with these folk and being patient. Sometimes the conversations require more patience than I think I've got. But I keep getting pushed to the limit and finding out, no, there's actually a reserve down in there that I can continue to draw on, not just for them, but for me. And for my kids and for my grandkids who are all on this journey with me together, right? So when I look at what's going on in my own backyard here in Minneapolis, I feel like, who knows where this is going to go? But as long as we put one foot in front of the other and keep making sure that our eyes are wide open as we walk, we'll figure it out. Like the old folks said, sometimes when there is no path to where you want to go, you got to make the road by walking. And that's what we're doing. And I do see people stepping up, right, with some courage and saying, all right, this is going to be hard, but let's stay on it. And, I'll have your back if you have mine, and let's keep walking. So I'm reasonably optimistic that we'll be able to find a way forward out of this. But, just like historians have said, history may not literally repeat itself, but it rhymes. And the moment that this rhymes with now feels to me like that year after the Fugitive Slave Act was passed in 1850. And a lot of white folk were so alarmed, so blown away by the obvious cruelty and wrongness of that law, that many people who didn't consider themselves activists felt the need to step up and step forward and do something, you know? And the hell of it is, where were we, in fact, on the road to at that moment? Well, we were on our way to a full-fledged civil war. That was where we were headed. And, you know, I hope we're not walking in the prelude of a time quite that bad. But let's be honest, we could be. But you know what? We'll survive it. We will, whatever comes. Because I think, you know, as Martin Luther King said, you know, the arc of justice may be long, but I mean, the arc of history may be long, but it bends in the direction of justice. And I believe that with all my heart. So, you know, strap in tight. It's going to be a long, bumpy ride, but wherever the hell we're ultimately going, you know, I feel like we got the gift, the spiritual depth to get us there. I have to believe that.
Thank you so much, David. Anaïs?
I feel like that's it, right? What more can be said about this question? No, you know, I really I resonate with a lot that's been said, and I've been thinking a lot about colonization and how that history in my own lineage in really complicated ways, and how it the violence of colonization in relation to, you know, breaking our bonds to each other and breaking our bonds to the land. Because I feel like when we're talking about liberation, which that's a question, right, Michael? The connection between art and liberation. We have to talk about those fractures. And so what I see us in a moment where, you know, there's like these rotting systems that have been rotting for a long time, and all of a sudden it's like all up in the open for everybody. People that weren't seeing it are seeing it now. And so, you know, kind of moving through some of this pain and this grief that's heightened in many ways requires that we witness each other in a real way, in a full way. And so I really feel like to think about liberation to me is an act of creativity, is an act of the imagination, because we haven't seen it. Even I think the world that we're trying to imagine and that I've heard from this group of poets tonight is not a world that we're there yet and that we're seeing yet. And so that to me is like the ultimate power of art, is that we're like, hey, I'm gonna let you in on who I am in this moment, and I'm willing to sit and witness you. And what can our imagination do together? And so, and I also think that it just requires hope to imagine liberation requires hope, and requires honesty. And I think there's a catharsis that can happen when we're just like, I'm gonna share the story. And yes, it's complicated and there's pain and all these things woven into it, but that's one step so that we can see each other, we can be connected to each other. So yeah, for me, it's really all about how do we break these cycles of disconnection with each other, and you know, how do we move against this numbness of what can, you know, the violence around us and these oppressive systems around us, and to really care and be willing to be transformed in the process. So I really think there's just a lot of power in art to offer that for all of us. And I, you know, from an organizing perspective, I just also don't see how we can talk about any kind of change without centering art and story.
True.
Because it's all about reframe. It's all about how can we shift the stories we've been told that are damaging about who we are, and imagine something different. So yeah, I'll stop there, but it's everything to me. And I think that everything resilient and everything that's brought clarity into who I am, and being raised in a culture that is, deeply grounded and has a deep belief system around who came before us, and that, the present and the past it's not a linear relationship. Art has been always at the center of that. So I know there's great power in it on a personal and a collective level for healing and transformation.
So much of that resonates with me because imagination is what's going to get us to liberation. Thank you so much. And Kaveh, love to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah. I can't improve upon what's been said, and I won't try to, but I will, in addition to reading everyone, Maider's work and David's work and Anaïs's work, I just want to introduce Mariam Kaba into the conversation, because she's who I'm sort of obsessed with in this moment right now. And she has a new book called We Do This Till We Free Us, and I've been reading it, and it's been helping me imagine along these lines a lot. I don't think that, I don't believe in our ability to rely on the state for moving towards accountability on behalf of its own violences. I don't believe that we can rely on carceral systems to achieve accountability either. I think that what a carceral system seeks to do is to excavate the site of the wound, and to, I don't want to get too sort of woo about this, but I think that a carceral state kind of exists to excavate the site of a wound, and to endlessly sort of reprocess and litigate and quantify around the site of the wound, to say this much capital is owed from this person to this person, whether that capital is financial or temporal or social, right? And what that means is that we end up sort of endlessly, the wound just never has a chance to close. The wound is never, we never gesture towards healing. Life is reduced to capital, and we say this life means that this person needs to spend X number of hours, X number of years in jail, whereas this life means that, and it is a cold system. It is a system that we know, quantifiably, objectively know values certain lives over other lives. And I don't think that the state is capable of moving us towards the transformative justice that I think that everyone here has been writing about and has been sort of dreaming towards. I do think that that's something that art is better equipped to do. It's nimbler. It is able to think in ways that aren't confined by the strictures of digits. And so I think that, this isn't a novel thought, and everyone else has articulated this beautifully, but I think that PIC abolition and art making are inextricably intertwined, because they're both acts of imagining, right? It's not just taking a wrecking ball to every prison in the country. It's also imagining the systems that will replace them, and imagining the futures and the lives that will replace them, right? Both are fundamentally generative acts, and not about abstinence, and not about what we're stripping away or what we're censuring, right? But they're about creation, and what we might be able to dream towards together as a endlessly intersecting community of human beings, all sort of moving towards the same horizon.
Thank you so much. I'm just vibing on imagination and interconnectedness tonight, and that's what's going to see us through. And I'm also just connecting to the idea about art as a more honest means of interrogating and imagining. And it's you're right. Tearing down what's broken is one thing. What are we going to build in its place? And that's where art comes in. I'm so grateful to all of you for what you've read tonight, for your thoughtfulness in response to that question that Sue made me send like a week ago, by just like, and all the good work, by the way, that Sue does to make this reading happen, inviting everyone to be here, sending out the notes that organize it, calling people a little early so we can get our tech game locked down, leading. The work of community doesn't happen automatically. People make that happen. And Sue is one of them. We, at the before time, we have this really cool tradition where we ask two of our instructors to close us, to end the evening for us. You guys, there are 70 people in the Zoom room tonight for this reading series and sharing community with our students who will see this video and know that we are here with them and thinking about them. And I'm just energized by that. And our instructors aren't in the classrooms right now, but we're coming. We'll be there soon. Until then, I'm so excited to have Chavonn share a word, and also Rachel. Chavonn, will you share a thought with us tonight?
Yeah, I'm so honored to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm so honored to witness the art and revolution that's happening in this very space. Oh my gosh, listening to Jeff and Fong, my heart, it was singing, listening to their voices again after so long. And I find it really amazing that amongst state-sanctioned violence, amongst state-pardoned violence and a raging pandemic, people are still finding ways to build community and build up community. And that goes some of the stuff that David said. I can't help but to be optimistic seeing spaces like this. This is the future. We are creating the future as we speak. I was going to read a different poem. I have one poem. I was going to read a different poem, but after hearing what everybody else said, I changed my mind. And I'll be reading a poem about South Minneapolis. It's called Communion. I shake ash the color of autumn from my fingers on a Franklin Avenue corner. Smoke floats past lips, familiar as music whistled through teeth. The men next to me greet each other, their handshakes a secret recipe. The girls across the street travel by skateboard, their movements subtle as breath. Bossa Nova drips from the duplex window. The bar below it grows graffiti like grapevines on its walls. More bodies join our corner, some blowing smoke of their own. Ashes fall like shooting stars from their mouths. Thank you.
Thank you, Chavonn. Thank you so much. Rachel?
Thank you, Chavonn. That was beautiful. And thank you to everyone, all the readers, and special thanks to Fong and Jeff. So wonderful to hear your words. I'm such a fan, as I know everyone here is tonight. So it's wonderful to just share with you. And I have to move from listening and being in a state of pleasure to remembering what I wanted to say, which was, I have a writing practice prompt, if it's useful to share. I have had, probably like many of us, struggled a little bit this year with sometimes knowing how to write and how to respond. And just as Kaveh was talking about, spending a lot of time just with me and wanting to figure out how to feel connected. So one thing I started doing about 6 months ago was giving myself a prompt of writing 10 phrases, 10 sentences, the evenings that I felt up to it. And I also gave myself a couple rules that at least one of those 10 phrases had to be phrased as a question, and one of them had to be written as more of a kind of philosophical or spiritual statement of some kind, just because if it was up to me, I would just write a whole bunch of images all the time of things I'd seen or heard or encountered during the day that made me feel connected. The reason this has felt important to me is because I think we've been talking about all of these themes of, disconnection, connection, kind of finding ways to have art save us and make us whole and be part of, the world, and have empathy with all the living things in the world. If it's of use to you, we're just past vernal equinox. We're at the start of a new season. It's always a good time to restart or recommit to a writing practice. I offer the prompt of giving yourself a couple rules, but only rules that feel happy and encourage your own connection to your writing practice. And if it's useful to you to run with it, go for it. And I should say that at the end of one thing I do on Sundays, which is my writing time, is look at that big list and borrow from it towards something else. So I should say that's another thing to try if it calls to you. I wanted to close with a poem by a poet I love, Kazim Ali. He's a wonderful poet and nonfiction writer. And this is a very short poem that feels like a song to me. So I wanted to close with it tonight. It's called Wrong Star. Wrong star I chose to sail under alone. I did not want to be alone, brought or abandoned. Those nights when I did not know, who could know? Am I invited? Do you remember? Which question needs answer? So I'll read the questions again as another offering to write with if it calls to you and you want to write them down. Those nights when I did not know, who could know? Am I invited? Do you remember? Which question needs answer? So thank you all. We miss you. We can't wait to see you all. We're thinking of you, and we're so glad you're here with us tonight, listening and being part of this. And thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. I just want to highlight your grace. I wrote down the evenings I felt up to it. Like, it's okay, especially right now in these trying times, like to take a night off if you need a night off. And the idea that if it's of use to you, which is also beautiful. And the kind of grace I think I'm going to try to carry into the classroom with me as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Hey, Mocha the cat is in the Zoom room, which is good luck. If you're so inclined, turn your cameras on and share a greeting, a wave, any kind of support you want to send out to our students. Thanks so much for being here. We love you guys.
Thank you for being here. Woo! Thank you, all of you. Thank you, Mai Der.
Thank you.
Yes,
love
you,
you, everyone.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, Chavonn. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Michael.
Bye, everybody. It was
Thank
great
you,
to see everybody.
Great to see everybody.
Hey, Jeffrey, I love you. Linnell, I love you. Dee, Fong, I love you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Doing this.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, everyone.
We did every bit of it.
Have a great night, everybody.
Yep, you too.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.